November the 26th, 1991 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. We're bringing you the history of Grand Prairie of the past and also those that made it happen. And today we have two wonderful people, a very illustrious family from Grand Prairie, Texas, that are helping us with our 160th taping. This is history tape number 160, and we have on the set today Mr. and Mrs. Wayne Hanks. Welcome, Wayne, to the show.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And Virginia, welcome also, my dear.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Now, let's set the stage, and Wayne, we're going to begin with you as the head of the family. And if you'd look out into your camera, and we'd like for you to establish your genealogy first. Give us the name of your parents and anything you want to tell about your family, and maybe name your brothers and sisters, and it's yours for a few minutes.
Fine. Thank you, Ruthie. My dad and mother was Harold and Martha Hanks. I was born in Iowa and raised in South Dakota up until the time I got out of high school, which was 16. I had come from a rather large family, have three brothers, Paul, Gail, and Maury, and two sisters, Mildred and Mary. And I stayed in South Dakota till I graduated from high school, and I graduated when I was 16, and went to California and lived with my sister, Mildred, until I was 17 and was able to join the Navy and see the world.
Wonderful. All right, now I'd like for you to name drop your mother's maiden name so we can complete our genealogy.
Fine. My mother's maiden name was Kraft, C-R-A-F-T.
Oh.
And she was my pride and joy.
Wonderful.
And along with my papa, he was great too. So.
All right. What did your dad do for a living, and what did you do in Iowa and South Dakota when you were growing up as a young man?
Well, basically, my dad was a maintenance man with the school board in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and he was worked there until he retired when he was 55, and then being an entrepreneur of the old school, he and my mother decided to buy a mama and papa grocery store in Sioux Falls, which they did, and that they ran for about 20 years.
All right. Now, did Wayne Hanks have any responsibilities at home growing up as a young man in either of these?
Well, basically, my big job was to stay out of trouble and get through school, and I did. That's where I became very involved with the YMCA. The YMCA was a haven for young people in Sioux Falls, and I was very involved in the YMCA program there.
When you were a young man and in school, and especially in your high school years, was there any particular favorite person or teacher that influenced your life in a big way?
Well, I played in the band. We were not of the position to have buy an instrument, so my father was a good friend of the band director, and they needed somebody to play the bass horn, which belonged to the school. So Mr. Thompson, who was the band director, taught me how to play the bass horn, and he also set me on, gave me some real good thoughts about what you got to be if you're going to succeed, and that is behave yourself is one of them.
Oh, all right. All right, now, and leaving that and going to California to live with your sister and joining the Navy to see the world, tell us a little bit about your Navy career.
Well, I was in the Navy for almost 3.5 years. I went in 1942 and served, went to Aviation Machinist Mate School in Norman, Oklahoma, and then was transferred from there to gunnery school as an aerial gunner. And as luck would have it, instead of getting assigned to a carrier operation with a squadron, I ended up getting assigned to the Naval Air Station in San Diego, working in the what's called the A&E shops, the aircraft and engine shops, as a mechanic, and I spent most of my time there during the Second World War.
Oh, that's wonderful. Got your A&E license and kept right on going, right?
It was the basic ground rules for what I ended up doing the rest of my life, which was in the aerospace business.
Yes, We're going to let you rest a minute, and now we're going to Virginia. Virginia, we need to establish you.
Okay.
First of all, we'd like for you to give the names of your parents and your brothers and sisters. Anything you'd like to say to the camera.
Okay. Well, my father was William Henry Craig, and my mother was Ruth Abbott, was her maiden name. And we lived in Winfield, Kansas, and I was born in Winfield, Kansas. And I went to school there. We lived on a farm. My family was Dad was a farm family. My grandfather and grandmother, we all kind of lived real close together. And I just remember that's what I did mostly, was I was kind of the tomboy of the family, because I have one sister.
One sister.
And so I helped my dad. I used to help on the farm, and I ran the tractor and all sorts of things, and then drove the truck, even when I hate to say, when I didn't have a license, and hauled wheat back and forth. But we were basically wheat farmers. And
so you've already told us that your chores included doing lots of good things,
yes.
didn't it? All right. Now, and where did you get your schooling in Kansas?
In Winfield, all the way through. I said my first couple years, I started out in one of those little one-room schools, you know.
Tell us about that. That's exciting for history.
It is. We had the full, well, really, 12 grades. And my sister, we had to walk to school. It wasn't too far from us. And like I said, I went my first 2 years or year and a half there. And I don't know, I could just remember, I remember them, I'm left-handed, I remember them trying to teach me, we had to do the old writing, you know, where the
ovals and the push
yes,
balls.
right, but I was left-handed, and I could not, they wanted me to be right-handed, and they tried to change me, and I had the terrible time with that. But of course I don't know, I can just see it in my mind right now. It's hard to describe, but it was, I think I got as good an education as I would have if it had been a 12-room school, so.
All right, tell me a little bit, was there any particular teacher that took you under her wing, or that you adopted the teacher and took her water and flowers and things like that? Is there any teacher that you remember in your past?
Well, there was probably, it was a man. It was my chemistry teacher. I can't even think of his name right now, but. And then, of course, when I was in high school, I think what influenced me was music again. I played the string bass from the time I was in the 3rd grade till I was a senior in high school. And when we had, Winfield was a big music town. In fact, one time we were written up in the Reader's Digest because they had brought into the gymnasium there like 500 pianos and piano players, and they all played like a together. And
in concert.
it was really fabulous. And like I said, we always brought a lot of orchestras. We had a good arts program in a little town of 15,000 people, so a wonderful arts program.
That is great. All right, we're going to leave you for a moment. We're going to get back with you with your immediate family, but let's get back to Mr. Wayne Hanks now. We're in San Diego. We're doing all of this A&E with aircraft. Where did you go from your aircraft experience there?
After I was graciously released by the U.S. Navy when I accumulated enough points after the war was over, I stayed in Los Angeles and went to college there. Basically did my first 2 years at Los Angeles City College, and then there was a movement on to expand the state college system in California, and I became very involved in bringing to Los Angeles a state college, which turned out to be Los Angeles State College, of course, which was on the same campus as Los Angeles City College. So I did my freshman and sophomore year at City College. I did my junior and senior year then, and graduate work at Los Angeles State College. One of the big movements that I got involved in, which was the death of some of the professors, was we felt that Los Angeles State College should have its own campus and become a full 4-year school, and worked very diligently to that end, and it eventually came about to be that way. Appeared before the State Education Committee a number of times pleading our case, and it came about 2 years. Well, it came about in my graduate year that they agreed that it would eventually have its own campus, and then about 3 years later, it got its own campus. So that kind of got me involved in politics, which has been part of my life ever since then, I guess. So, but I did my graduate work there. Although I got my degree in accounting, I did my graduate work in secondary education, and got my master's degree and a secondary teaching credential in the state of California. And I wanted to be a teacher. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and taught 1 full year in the Los Angeles City school system. And but I found out I had a bad habit of eating 3 times a day, and I could make more money working part-time in the aerospace business than I could working full-time as a teacher. So I migrated back to a company in Huntington Park, California that I had been with before I went in the Navy, and started back there and got involved with a guy who really turned out to be my mentor. There was a guy by the name of Slim Sargent, Sumner Benedict Sargent II, and he came from a large family. And I worked for him for about 9 years, and learned many, many things from him. He was the world's greatest salesman, and also the most brilliant engineer I ever met. And he told me one time, he said, Hanks, you're going to have an opportunity to be on your own, and if you'll just remember one thing, you'll be a success, and that is just build your company based on what the Supreme Court's interpretation of what goodwill is. And goodwill is the tendency of a person to return to a place where they've been well treated. And that stuck with me forever. And, well, so far anyway. And it basically turned out to be a good, basic, fundamental approach to business. And that's pretty much how I've run my company, is based on that.
All right. Now let's get back to Virginia. Virginia, how did you meet this young man?
Well, when I graduated from high school, I moved to the big city of Wichita, Kansas, and I applied for a job with Braniff Airlines as a ticket agent, and I got it. And I worked at the airport in Wichita, it's a new airport, as a ticket agent for Braniff Airlines. And of course, Wayne, being the traveling salesman, anyway, that's how we met. He traveled into Wichita to call on some of the big aircraft companies there, and we met over the ticket counter and proceeded on to marriage.
That's exciting that you didn't meet him on a blind date. Isn't that wonderful that you just met face-to-face across a ticket counter?
You've heard the story of the traveling salesman and the farmer's daughter, right?
Yes,
Well,
yes.
this pretty much is a living example of that.
All right, and then you all married, and we'd like for you now to put into the record your wonderful family, about your children, and name drop and anyone that you want to put in there. That's yours.
Okay. Of course, we're married and have 3 daughters. Have 3 daughters. Our oldest daughter, Linda, is married to Michael Lee, and they have a little. Our first little grandbaby is Elena Lee, and they live here in Grand Prairie. Linda works at the Mother's Day Out program at the Methodist Church, First Methodist Church, and Mike is with Joslyn, which is in Arlington, Joslyn Manufacturing. And then Martha is our middle daughter, and she is married to Tony Vanderveerdonk. They don't have any children yet. Martha is the director of convention services at the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas. And Tony is with Pioneer Electronics, I think in Las Colinas, and they live in Grand Prairie. And then our youngest daughter is Jane, and she's married to Blaine Christian, and they have our second little grandbaby, Pricey, and Janie is in the marketing department at Control Products, and Blaine is with Glazier Industries out of Dallas, and they live in Grand Prairie. So we're very fortunate to have all of our family here in Grand Prairie.
Oh, that you are really blessed. Now tell me about the real Virginia. you worked, I know, at this Braniff ticket counter. Have you worked out of the home in all of those other years?
No, after our oldest daughter was born, I didn't work until the girls were, the younger girls were in junior high school. And my first job was to run my own company for 11 years.
Oh, good.
So
would you like to name drop about what you did and how exciting that was?
Well, it doesn't sound very glamorous, but I had a company called Prairie Products, which is still in existence, but Control Products bought me out. So,
good.
But I manufactured a grease cup that goes on machinery. It was mainly a maintenance sort of thing, and like I said, there are a few women in the business, but I enjoyed it very, very much. And very small, but I really enjoyed it. And about 4 years ago, Wayne was expanding, and I decided I didn't want to have to move again, so because I was in his building, so I sold it to him. And since then, I guess I'm supposed to be a lady of leisure, but I'm more unorganized than I ever was in my life. Between my grandbabies and what?
Supervising the social life of this young man.
Traveling. We do travel a lot now, so that's kind of makes it. But I don't do much volunteer work anymore. I did that all when I wasn't working, when the girls were younger. But I was involved in a lot of. And PTA, I tried it with the family, and YMCA, and Red Cross, and things like that. But now, as I said, pretty much my family keeps me occupied, and I love every minute of it.
That's wonderful. All right, Wayne Hanks, front and center. What brought you to Grand Prairie, and when did you come to Grand Prairie, and was there any extenuating circumstances?
It's very interesting, Ruthie, that we are sitting here today because it was exactly 25 years ago, about today, that we moved to Grand Prairie, Texas.
Okay.
Ginny and I worked for a company called American Machine and Foundry, and was in the marketing group in the Defense Products Group, and they had a habit of moving you whenever they felt like it. So Ginny and I moved about 8 times in the first 11 years that we were married, and 2 of those occasions we had lived here in Grand Prairie, had lived here in the Dallas area. So we kind of made up our mind that if and when we liked it, and if and when we ever quit traveling for a business, for a living, that we were going to make our home in the Dallas area. Well, because of some circumstances in a job I had with in Middletown, Ohio, with a company, I had decided to leave there, and I went home and told Virginia that I just resigned and we're moving to Grand Prairie, Texas. And she said, that's fine. So we had decided, I had kind of decided on Grand Prairie because it's so centrally located, and I was going to set up as a manufacturer's rep, and so to service the Dallas companies and the Fort Worth companies and the Hearst companies in the mid-cities area, I thought Grand Prairie would be a good place to work out of. Plus, I knew Ray Wallace very well and his family, and Ray lived here, and I just thought that this would be a good place to settle, and so I came down here on my own, found a house, the house that we're presently living in, which was empty and was for sale. I took some Polaroid pictures of it and took it home, and I said, Virginia, here is your new home. And I guess she didn't have courage enough to say, I think maybe I ought to look at it. I'd hate to think I'd do that now, but you know, 25 years ago, she was a little more lenient with how I did things. And I came down about 2 weeks later and signed the papers on it, and we went home. I went back to, we were living in Dayton, and we packed up and we're on our way to Texas. So, and we've been here ever since, and it's the best move I ever made in my life.
And you continued being a sales rep until when?
About 24 years ago, I had some friends of mine were involved in a company called Control Engineering over in Fort Worth, which was hit upon hard times, and but owned a wholly owned subsidiary called Control Products. And they came to me and said, we think this little company's got a future, but not as a part of control engineering, because control engineering was in the process of going bankrupt. So I decided, I looked at it and found out that it had more problems than it really should have, and its chances of survival were slim and none. But it was kind of a challenge, because one of the reasons I left the company up in Middletown, Ohio, was because they told me I was the world's greatest salesman, but I had no management capability. So I got to looking around at this operation and decided that I could buy all the stock of that company, of Control Products, for $3. I gave each one of the 3 stockholders $1 for their stock. And I thought, for $3, I'll find out if that guy knew what he was talking about.
Yes, if you could manage
it.
it.
Will not be expensive. It won't be an expensive lesson. So I ended up taking over the company, worked out some arrangements with they had a little trouble with the federal government as far as taxes were concerned, and got all that worked out. Worked an operating deal with the suppliers. It was about the time the A7 was just beginning to be made at Vought, or LTV at that time. And a good friend of mine was a buyer on that was buying the edge-lighted instrument panels for the A7, and I went to him and asked him what he thought the chances of Control Products would be on that particular program. And he said, well, they make a very good panel, they just need some financing. And if somebody was running it that we had some confidence in, I'm sure they'd do very well. So, not knowing anything about the lighting business, I couldn't even say integrally lighted panels at the time, but I did know how to build things, and unfortunately, Control Products prior had been run by a couple of engineers, and I'll probably get shot for this, but my whole philosophy has always been that you show me a small company run by an engineer, and I'll usually show you a loser, because they never want to make the same thing twice in the same way. So anyway, I didn't know anything about the engineering, I didn't know anything about lighting, but I knew how to make things. So we got started, and we became the sole supplier to Vought on both the A7 Delta and the A7 Echo, the A7 D&E production contracts. And that program made Control Products. At the time I took over Control Products, they were located over in Fort Worth. And being the salesman that I am, I decided if my best customer was in Grand Prairie, so I moved from Fort Worth to right across the street from Vought over on Southeast 14th Street. And the panel business is very interesting in that it's the last thing you design in a cockpit.
Yes.
And it's the first thing you change is the panels. So you don't want that problem 1,800 miles away from you. So I thought if it was right across the street, it might enhance my position, and it did. And we did very well. That program really was what made Control Products and kept it alive while we developed the rest of it. So.
We have talked, and we have 4 minutes left. We need to talk about the Wranglers. We need to talk a little bit about politics. We need to talk about rodeo. And you're getting ready now. Your company has just been singled out as one of the top growing businesses in the Metroplex, all of that good stuff. Give me something on all of those things just in a nutshell in about 3 minutes.
Okay, I will give you, on the Dallas 100, we were selected as number 75, 75th fastest growing privately owned company in the Dallas area, out of a competition of around 600 companies. That all goes to my people. They're responsible for all that. You know, the train runs whether you got what kind of an engineer system.
That's it.
So,
Now
we're very proud about
Now
that.
tell me a little about the first Wrangler president, mover and shaker in rodeos, bringing it to Traders Village, doing all of these good things.
Well, the Wranglers, of course, you and I have talked about historically for a long time.
Yes.
We've been in existence 15 years. It's a service club, regardless of what some people might think it is. And its whole purpose is to put on Western days and bring the rodeo to Grand Prairie. We have probably the finest outdoor rodeo, 3-day rodeo in the state of Texas. We've been recognized by the PRC, Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, has recognized us as one of the top 5 committees out of 660. I was fortunate enough to be selected as Rodeo Committeeman of the Year to receive the John Justin Award in 1987. So, and we do have an excellent rodeo. We have people come to the rodeo, to our rodeo, that come only because of the way we treat the cowboys. And that's how we build our rodeo.
All right, now you and Tag Taggart are getting ready to go on another sojourn on rodeos and good stuff.
Week from tomorrow, we go to Las Vegas to the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association meeting for the committee's meetings, and at that time we'll submit our rodeo for approval for this year's performance, which is the 15th, 16th, and 17th of May this year. Western Day celebration starts 2 days before that, which will be on the 13th. We think we did some really exciting things this last year on our Western Day celebration, and we're really all corked up about this coming year, and we know it's going to be better.
Now, I know you have at least one other interest you might want to name drop, but Rotary, you're into Rotary?
Rotary.